Struggling to get started with that one big task. It could be a report for work or an assignment that is due in a week. You just don't know how and where to begin. So you just keep procrastinating that task. And this is chipping away at you, making you feel depressed, guilty, and anxious. Look, I have been there. I was a serial procrastinator for most of my life. Shitty grades, assignments due. But for the last 4 years, I've completely transformed myself. I have now been able to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do, without any resistance from my body. This has been my superpower that allowed me to become one of the best performing students in both my bachelor's and my master's program, and to be a software engineer at Fortune 500 companies. And to be honest with you, the answer is not some supplement or some quick 5-minute hack. In this video, I'm going to share with you my complete systems to get these large tasks done without the use of any motivation. The system has 3 components, and I guarantee you, if you follow them the right way, you're never going to procrastinate tasks again. So let's get right into it. You see, when we have a big task on our plate, we naturally just see that task as one giant mountain that needs to be climbed. And this mountain represents all the hours of work that you do, all the sacrifices that you have to make to do that task. But the thing is, when you look at tasks this way, then your body chickens out. It loses any desire to climb that mountain and waste all its precious energy. So instead, what we end up doing is that we procrastinate climbing altogether. We tell ourselves that we're going to do this tomorrow or the day after, and before you know it, it has been weeks. The trick that worked for me was to stop looking at these tasks as one giant block, but to instead now look at these giant tasks as a collection of subtasks. For example, you have this report that is supposed to be 100 pages long. When you look at this 100-page long report, you're going to be put in a state of inaction. So instead of viewing it that way, you can break this report down into chapters, and each of these chapters now might be just 20 pages long. All of a sudden, you have greatly reduced the energy requirement for this task. Now you're no longer trying to reach the peak of Mount Everest. You're just trying to take 20 steps up a slope. When you start looking at a task as a collection of subtasks and attempt to focus only on one singular component, then all of a sudden your body stops resisting. It now thinks that, yeah, this guy can actually do this tiny bit of a task. One of my clients who was an international student was procrastinating studying for exams. So the first thing what we did was break this task of studying for exams into smaller tasks of studying different subjects. And we broke it further down into studying different chapters. And he understood that his job now is not to study for exams, but to rather only deal with one tiny chapter at a time. And when he could see that, okay, this tiny chapter is just going to take me like 2 hours to finish, like when he could see the finish line right in front of him, he just got up and started working on it. So the task breakdown rule is great, but just because you've broken down tasks, that doesn't mean you're just going to get them done. Sometimes you're still going to feel a lot of resistance even when doing that tiny piece of task. This is why this step is extremely important. This statement is probably going to change your life because it absolutely changed mine. It is easier to do the same thing at the same time every day than to do random things at random times. Pause the video and let that idea really sink in. When you apply this principle in your life, then you will naturally end up living your life by a routine. Because in the past, I would think to myself that, hey, you know what, I'm going to get my act together and I'm going to just study tomorrow. But then I would wake up and then I would start debating myself, should I be studying now or perhaps after lunch or perhaps later in the evening? I don't know. We'll see how the day goes. But by the end of the day, I wouldn't study and the cycle would repeat the next day and the next day. What I do now instead is that I have a very specific time dedicated to when I'm going to do a certain activity. And when the clock hits that time, I drop everything and just focus on what I had scheduled for that time. No more making decisions, no more debates, no more, oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow with more effort. None of that. Now I just blindly follow my routine. What happens when you start following a routine for like 2-3 months, then all those activities in that routine, they become your identity and almost become effortless to do. Like now I could just wake up and start working, and a couple of hours later I would just go hit the gym, and my body doesn't resist these 2 activities because I've been doing them for so long. My body knows that this is his bread and butter. This is what he does. Don't put any resistance. Back to my client. So what we did for this international student was that we designed a routine for him, and we figured that between 8 to 10 a.m. that is when he's going to study. This is the time period where we're going to start attacking those tiny subtasks. Now you've broken down the giant subtask, you've scheduled these tiny subtasks in your routine, you are ready to sit on the table, but there's just one problem. You are just not able to focus. You realize that your attention span is trash. You're having 10 different thoughts in your head, you're constantly zoning out, and this work session felt so painful and unproductive that you wish to procrastinate it the next day. The brutal truth is most people have lost their ability to do deep focused work because they have damaged their attention span. And unless you get this attention span back, you cannot get the work done. If you want to ensure that you have a productive work session, then the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you're getting high quality of sleep. If you're sleeping and waking up at random times each day and only getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, then your brain is simply not going to operate when you ask it to do the work. So the client that I was working with, his sleep was pretty bad. So the first thing that we did is got him on protocols to optimize his sleep. And within a week, his work sessions became 60% more productive. The second thing that allows you to have a productive work session is a distraction-free environment. If you're trying to study math or program something and there's someone who's constantly trying to talk to you, or your notifications are going off every 5 minutes, then that session is incredibly unproductive. Because contrary to popular belief, there is no such thing as multitasking. If you're being distracted by notification or chitter-chatter, then you have to spend a lot of brain power switching between tasks. So what I do now is that I do my deep work in a completely quiet room, and I put on these noise cancellation headphones. And you don't even require them. You can even use earplugs if you have them. And lastly, I put my phone on flight mode. If you can create such an elite distraction-free environment for yourself, then one of your deep work sessions can equal to some distracted guy's entire week of work. In the past, when I would start working, my work sessions would last only about 20 minutes before I got tired or zoned out. My attention span was actually that bad. But the good news is you can actually improve your attention span. Just the way that you grow your muscles by doing resistance training, you can also grow your attention span by doing focused bouts of effort. The first day I could only manage 20 minutes of deep work, but after 2-3 days, I stepped up to 25 minutes of deep work. And a couple of days later, I decided to do 30 minutes of deep work. So just by following this strategy of progressive overload, I went from being able to do 20 minutes of deep work to doing around 4 hours of deep work a day in just 3 months. So not only was I now laser focused in my deep work sessions, but the duration of my deep work sessions was far longer. And this allowed me to chip away at these subtasks way quicker. Back when I was in high school, I remember sitting in one of my math classes and my professor was writing something on the board and he was explaining things. And I just remember just looking at him and listening to what he said, but absolutely nothing registered in my head. Like I was completely zoned out. And looking back at it, the reason for this was because of my diet. I was eating chips, soda, chocolates, because these things had become my coping mechanism for negative emotions. But what these things also did to me was that they gave me brain fog. And when you're in the state when you have brain fog, then it becomes very hard to absorb things. So if you've experienced these brain fog-like symptoms, like you're reading the same page of the book over and over again, but nothing is going in your head, then it could be your diet that is causing this. What I did to eliminate brain fog was that I started eating really clean, healthy, whole food again. And I stopped consuming all this processed garbage that comes in packets and has a laundry list of ingredients in it. You feed this giant task to your system. This task then gets broken down into tiny subtasks. And then you allocate these tiny subtasks to your deep work block in your routine. And hopefully you've been following these good habits that give you a good attention span so you can actually get the work done. If you would like to work with me in helping you set up these systems in your life to get that one big project down, then make sure that you click on the link in the description and book a one-on-one call with me. Alternatively, you can also DM me on Instagram and talk about your problems. My ID is Jibreal Khan 97.